Welcome to the third installment of Faint Footsteps World War II. In Part 3, new Canadian recruits for the Combined Operations Organization travel overseas aboard a Dutch liner after a failed first attempt. Buckets of fun was had by all? Hardly. When Doug Harrison, Burl McIntyre, and about 100 other members of RCNVR volunteered for Combined Ops in December 1941, they did not really know what their overseas duties would be. In early January 1942, however, they were instructed to throw their kit bags onto trucks bound for a jetty in Halifax behind the Westin Hotel. They were soon aboard the Queen of Bermuda, a ship that likely impressed the raw recruits, some as young as 17, whose only experience at sea had been a few hours upon a minesweeper. Surely they were filled with questions. Where are we headed? And what happens when we get there? Only 3 months earlier, Lord Mountbatten, their new commander of Combined Operations, had been instructed by Prime Minister Winston Churchill to begin a program of raids of ever-increasing intensity, which would ultimately lead to the reinvasion of France. Mountbatten's mandate included creating training centers and assault bases, devising successful invasion plans, and the machinery of war in cooperation with all arms of the military. His whole attention was to be concentrated on the offensive. Early in his command, Mountbatten asked where the invasion crafts would come from. Thousands upon thousands were needed, along with crews to man them. Soon thereafter, Canada made an initial offer of 50 officers and 300 sailors. Burl McIntyre and my father were included in the very first draft, but this was a drop in the bucket for any major invasion. Speaking of buckets, on the same day the Queen of Bermuda left Halifax Harbor in early January 1942, she ran aground at Chebucto Head, having traveled about 25 kilometers with our Canadian sailors on board. Some of them recall the events in memoirs. There was quite a blizzard coming down, writes Al Kirby. After grinding to a stop, I went forward to take a look. To my astonishment, there was a big cliff no more than 100 feet away. About 10 o'clock, we were given buckets and marched down 6 decks. We began to bail, passing the buckets from man to man. We could hardly work with all the laughing going on. Lloyd Evans from Ottawa writes, we sailed at noon in a heavy snowstorm, missed the starboard buoy, and grounded on a rock. A bucket brigade was organized, and I joined the happy band bailing out the Atlantic Ocean with buckets. And my father recalls, it was like emptying a bucket of sand, one grain at a time. Arrangements were made to transport the Navy boys overseas from Halifax again, and in mid to late January they tossed their kit bags onto the Volendam, a Dutch liner, for an eventful trip overseas. Late at night I was on watch at our stern and saw a red plume of an explosion on our starboard quarter, writes my father. In the morning an American four-stacker was not to be seen. I heard cries for help from a life raft or lifeboat. Although I informed the officer of the watch, we were unable to stop and place ourselves in jeopardy. On perhaps the same evening, Lloyd Evans was surprised to see destroyer HMS Belmont go full speed ahead and sacrifice itself by taking 2 German torpedoes. He writes, for obvious reasons, we didn't slow down to look for survivors, but a rescue ship came out to look for them. Both Canadian sailors recall arriving safely in Scotland and passing the hat to show their gratitude to the crew of their lone remaining escort vessel, HMS Firedrake. The hard lessons learned at sea barely had time to sink in, because shortly after the boys disembarked onto dry land near Glasgow, they were ordered to embark upon the first of many train rides in the United Kingdom, to one training camp or another. In this first case, their destination was unknown.